631s. So I'll begin with a remote meeting paragraph. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, GLC 30A, Section 18, and Governor Healy's March 29th, 2023 revised order extending remote participation by all members in any meeting of a public body. This meeting of the Great Barrington Board of Health will be conducted by remote participation to the greatest extent possible. Specific information in the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and/or parties with a right and/or requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the town's website at townofgb.org. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to listen to the meeting may do so in the following manner. See instructions at the top of the agenda. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. That being said, we will officially call the meeting to order with a roll call vote. Peter Stanton.
Aye.
Dr. Ruby Chang.
Aye.
And I am here as well, Michael Anu. First order of business is approval of the minutes from July 23rd and July 31st. And I had one revision that I wanted to make to the minutes from July 23rd. It would be under the business section, down in bullet point 5, the last sentence. The minutes at the present say challenges presented by the independent water testing results and the role of the Board of Health in this matter was discussed by Emily New. Stated the board does not have regulatory or enforcement authority, and there's no evidence of DEP testing is faulty. I'd like that amended to the board is not the primary regulatory or enforcement authority. Other than that, I see no issue with the minutes. If you two are amenable to that revision, we can take a motion to have those approved.
I'm good with those changes, and I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes from July 23rd with that amendment.
I second.
And we'll take a roll call vote. Peter?
Aye.
Ruby?
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. Okay, are there any Board of Health questions or updates before we get into our public hearing tonight? I don't have any. And not hearing any from you two. I'll look for a motion to reopen the public hearing, which is a review of the proposed order to correct citing Houstonic Waterworks Company under the authority of MGL Chapter 111, Section 122 and 123.
I make a motion to reopen the public hearing.
I second.
And our roll call vote will be Peter.
Aye.
Ruby.
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. Before we get into it, just wanted to say I think we should take this time to go over any more edits or changes we want to make to our order. And then we received a request this afternoon from Mr. Mercer of HWW and his attorney. And before we get into the public or further public comment, I would like to give them an opportunity to address the board. They have requested as much. So that's what I'd like to see happen tonight.
Great.
And with that, are there any other comments the board would like to make about the order? We received back our amended draft. And to me, it looks like the whereas sections are okay with me. But there is just a couple technicalities in the now therefore section I think we just need to look at. So if you want me to start, I can, or if either of you have anything you'd like to look at in the whereas section.
I'll go for it.
Okay. And now what therefore on page 6 in the second paragraph, about midway through, we refer to random testing, but I think per our discussion and that word should be changed to regular testing and not random, because I think our testing is going to be anything but random, but it will be regular.
Could it be more specific to the recommendations of whoever we're consulting with at that point?
It also could be that, yes. It kind of refers to that in that section. I just thought if we substituted regular for random, the rest of the section,
I think we have to refer to Mike and Mr. Dineski about this.
yes.
Okay, so what we need to discuss still is who and how the testing is going to be done. And Jim could not be here tonight. He had a prior obligation, so he's unable to be joining us. And David, just so you know, Jim is the operator who is acting as a consultant for us here. And I'm sorry, I'm gonna just hold on. Just give me 1 second. I've got to just hold on.
Sure. And for those tuning in, I'd like to welcome Mr. Dineski, who is town council, and thank him for coming to tonight's meeting.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm babysitting my grand dog, and he has a toy, and I'm sure that you're gonna hear it in the background if I don't get it from him. Anyhow, so Jim Starbard has suggested that when the testing take place, that actually it should be not having a vendor come in and do the testing and bring it back to their lab and going through it that way, but it would be much more productive to have an agent of the Board of Health do the actual sampling, go to people's homes. When you get a complaint, send somebody over there to go get a sample and take it right to the lab. Presumably, you'll use the lab that's in Lee because that's the closest one to you that's certified, other than the one that's being used, I think, right now by Housatonic Waterworks. I don't think you want to use the same laboratory, although you can, but I don't think that you probably would want to do that. So you'd be bringing the samples to the lab, much faster turnaround, much more responsive. If you're waiting 7 days and all of a sudden something awful starts happening in the neighborhood to the water and everybody starts calling on the same day, it would put yourselves at a disadvantage to say, well, we can't go today because we just went yesterday. So that would have been his suggestion, and because of the open meeting law, I was not able to talk to each of you individually about that before this meeting.
I think it makes sense. I would hope for the notice's purpose that we don't have to be so specific about how it's going to be done, but just to say that it's going to be done and use language like on a regular basis, responsive to complaints or something like that. But I would hope that we could still make decisions down the road as we need to.
Unless David, unless you think that there's something that precludes that in that language.
So, members and Mr. Chair, your description of the manner of testing is within your discretion, and the specifics are or would be as you designate and delineate in the order. If you were to do this by taking samples from individual properties, as Mr. Hugo suggested, then the fact that you make notice of that in the order, in my view, would be sufficient. And individual property owners, it would be their choice whether to allow an agent of the board to enter the property and take a sample. But I don't think you would need to get more specific than identifying the fact that that's the proposed protocol for taking samples.
Okay.
So does the language as it's written, the change to regular, does that give us the flexibility the road. Can we just change that word and we'll be good to go?
You
Um,
may want to simply say a program of regular testing, which would, in my view, allow for a certain measure of flexibility as to the particulars of when and where. It is something that you would want to have delineated in a written document, but it wouldn't, in my view, require that every week on every day of the week be precisely the same.
Okay. Yes, I think that's what I was getting at, that we,
can I interrupt and just share with you?
yes,
I had made a call to the Microbac lab in Lee, and their operation is that they have their own vials, which will be they recommend that we bring the vials that they recommend for individual testing, and the haloacetic acid is a different vial than the typical manganese. The turnaround time for them is 7 to 10 days, and they do not have collection service. So the cost for them is $160 for haloacetic acid and $27 for plain manganese. I would like to have a couple proposals. One of them is that we simultaneously test the individual person's tap as well as the source, because that's the only way we're going to know what's coming from the source and what is coming out of the tap. And we need to compare them, so they should be done at approximately the same time. Number two is that I would recommend that we do an initial baseline testing because people are worried about what else is in the water. And so we can't just assume that we would just test for manganese and haloacetic. And we could do a whole panel for $145. If you want arsenic in there, there's an additional $27. And this will be just an initial testing so that we have an overall view of what is in the water. And I would recommend that this get tested again at the source. So those are my two recommendations.
okay.
I think
David, oh, go ahead, Peter.
I was just gonna say, I think that makes a lot of sense, and we just have to figure out what the access to the source is so that we can do that in a timely fashion with the tap testing.
Right.
So question for both Mike and or David, what kind of language would we need to have in this section to reflect those desires of the board?
Mr. Chair, you would want to include some language that specifies that testing locations will be the source and individual service locations. I think those would be appropriate phrases.
Okay,
I'm just wondering if I can take a break for a second and ask, maybe it's Rebecca, I don't know, how are we gonna adopt these edits to this document?
I'm making notes as you're talking right now, and I imagine Mike Hugo's doing the same thing. So between the both of us, I think we're going to capture the changes that you're talking
Great.
about.
Okay, thanks.
okay.
We ready for your next point?
Yes, while they do that, down in section, in the therefores, the further ordered sections, 5 and 6, I think we have to set a couple, timetables there. Right now, it's just blank. The section 5 talks about submitting a work plan with work plan with date milestones for compliance with all terms of this order within, and we have to specify a certain number of days.
All right, before you move on, I think you need to go back to that previous
Okay.
edit and tell me where you'd like to see those
Sure.
changes.
Okay,
Instead of random, a regular program of,
Yep, got that one.
and
And then,
then I needed to add somehow a reference to to include testing at the source, right?
okay.
and I,
Source being tap water or source of,
So let me just two things. Number one is when you do testing, it should be done at the source of the supply of water as well as individual residents' household tap. Because that's what people are looking at.
I'm
Well, you mean
guessing we
the
don't know
source?
enough about the source because there's probably the water coming in and then there's the water after it's treated coming out. That's still the source before it heads into the pipes for
Right,
distribution. So the source could mean multiple things.
yes.
What would you recommend?
I think I completely want to lean on the consultants and a decision that we can make down the road. We don't have to have that completely pinned down tonight, because we don't know the details. But clearly there must be an option for I think I've even seen in some of their testing that there's before and after treatment options for testing. So I think we could get it after treatment, but before it hits the pipes.
So you don't want to go into the specifics of the testing. You want to just keep it random.
Well, no, I'm good with the regular program and I'm good with the recommendations you made about when we do testing at the tap, that we're also testing at the source so we can understand the difference. I'm all about all of that. I'm just thinking that we're gonna probably lean on a consultant and a program that's gonna be developed with them after today's meeting. And so this document doesn't need to say specifically where at the source we're gonna be testing, because I don't think we can know that.
Oh, and so how would you like to word it?
It's still gonna be a program that is gonna, we're gonna, consult uh, with, I don't know whether it's this licensed site person or somebody else. We're going to work on a program with a consultant that is going to include regular testing and include testing at the source.
Well, I agree with Peter. I think that we have language in the conditions, the ordered conditions, that a plan will be drawn up with the consultant. And I think if it's sufficient, as David has alluded to say the source, I think we should leave further specificity up to that, drawing up that plan.
I think that's fine.
Okay, good. So do we need to, it seems like the consultant, we still have language in there talking about the frequency of testing is going to be determined by the laboratory and consultant. Should it merely be the Board of Health and consultant, or is the
Yeah.
laboratory going to be weighing in?
I think so, Michael, because what's going to really end up happening in real life is that you're going to get a call at the health department office. Somebody's going to be in distress because of the condition of the water being especially bad, and if Rebecca is there, or if not, it'll be your agent will already have the vials from the laboratory. There is the manganese is actually more of a bottle, and the HAA5 is more of a vial itself, and the bottle can be filled up pretty much, but the vials have to be filled up to the top, and then to the point where when they put the stopper on it, the water actually comes out. They have to be completely filled with no air. So there's a way to do it. And in real life, what's going to happen is they're going to get a call and someone's going to leave the office and go out and go grab the sample. And then at some point, the lab is going to tell you whether or not it has to be put on ice or whether or not it could be left in the car 150,000 degrees like we've been having in our cars the past few weeks. But the lab will tell you how to do it. So I think that we need to really do a little reworking of this particular paragraph, and I'll have something for you in front of David either later on tonight or first thing in the morning.
Okay. Yes, because the lab will specify the proper protocol for collecting the sample generally, and with all the specifics, as some of which you've alluded to. So
There also, just so you know, there also is a chain of custody certificate that you're going to be. They'll give you copies of that, you know, along with their vials. But that you're going to have to be very careful, and that's why it should really be an agent of the Board of Health. And I would suggest. I know right now that the folks that are part of your Public Health Excellence Collaborative, I think that inspector is gone for a week or two, but you might want to just make sure that those people that are working with you are actually appointed agents. And what I would suggest is that when we're done with this portion of it, and just make a note so we don't forget to do this, that you generically, and I think that this is something that was not reasonably anticipated by the chair before. I'm saying it right now, and this is a result of my conversation with the lab. You should appoint the agents, any of the agents of the South Berkshire Public Health Collaborative to be agents of the Board of Health. That way, if their person is gone and you don't have anybody there, I hate to do this to Jim without him saying okay, but Jim or Jane or somebody working under them can go grab a sample and get it to Lee.
we do have a number of agents from the Alliance that we have just recently worked with who are agents of ours already. We've already appointed them for during the time where we didn't have an inspector, and now we do have a full-time inspector. So I've had a conversation with Rebecca about this, and I think we have good coverage at this point. But of course, if it looks like that's not going to work out, we would of course do that.
Right. Okay.
Yep. Okay, so this is going to be reworked, this paragraph. And we will have to revisit it in a subsequent meeting then, I'm assuming.
I don't know how, yeah.
Mr. Chairman, yes, to the extent we're making changes that cannot be finalized this evening, I do think that it would be appropriate to not adopt a final vote in order until the full text is available and in front of all the board members.
Okay, I'm in agreement with that. Yes. Okay.
Just one sec, sorry. On that note, I would just say, let's see what else comes up, because I think we could work through that language pretty quickly. And if that would allow us to move things forward, I still want to consider that.
I agree with Peter. I think we could work out the language, adopt it, and then vote on it.
But let's see how it goes.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. So moving down to those sections 5 and 6, it seems like we could, I think tonight, decide what the time period is for those two ordered conditions. Whenever that date is that this order is officially approved, what is the time period that we would like to see for a work plan with milestones for compliance?
It seems like 10 to 14 days.
So say 14 then?
Oh, I'm good with that.
Okay. In the section just after that, number 6. We're asking for a supply of documentation to the board it seemed like every 7 days or week would suffice.
Yep. Every 7 days.
Okay. And Rebecca, was there anything else that we had noticed? I think it was just those 3 things that in our brief conversation we had the other day.
No, I think one of the questions was when this order would, like, when it would take effect, and then, you know, referring to the top of the document, it says effective immediately. So I think once you issue it, anything thereafter would constitute a violation.
Right.
I think there has to be some wording in there, that, we would have to allow some time for, recommendations for testing by the site, specialist.
My impression was, I think we did have that in there. I thought that was part of that 14 days of a work plan. But maybe or where do you see that, Ruby, going in?
Going back to, page 6,
Mm-hmm.
where we had made those corrections.
Mm-hmm.
I think that, with the corrections in mind, that we allow a period of, you know, of time for us to determine exactly the method and quantity of testing to be done. And once that schedule is set in place, then from that time on is when this order takes effect.
Well, that's one part of the order. We do have an order, the provision for supplying bottled water. I would think that needs to take effect right away.
Right. So we could have times for both. And they should be separate.
Okay.
So we need to identify the 2 parts. One part is the availability of potable water, which should take effect immediately. And then the other part would be the actual testing, which would occur after we've had, a schedule set up between the Board of Health and the site engineer, a consultant, but not longer than 2 weeks, or somewhere around there before testing starts.
Mr. Chair, if I may, number
Yes,
of
sir.
paragraph 2 specifies the time period by which the bottled water is to be distributed. So I think by its terms, the order already includes time periods. Certainly it does with respect to the water, and I think what's contemplated under the wording of the order is that the testing would not begin until the program or regimen is established.
Okay. So do we need to put an exact number of days to that, or?
I don't think you do, no.
Okay.
I'm sorry, what paragraph are you in?
Page 6.
Yeah, number 2, paragraph 2, is that?
Paragraph 2.
Bullet point 2 down at the bottom of the page there.
Mhm.
I think that's what he was referring to.
Yes.
Yes, yeah. Is that satisfactory, Ruby, that we have enough language in there? Or do you want to see further specificity?
I think we need to put some timeline in the second paragraph of page 6, where, carried out at the expense of the respondent for a period of time to be determined by said laboratory until such time as the board determined that water supply does, okay. I think that's good.
Okay, so
Yeah.
that, we still need to see a revised paragraph. And I know you and Peter have expressed desire to see that tonight, but is that reasonable to expect that we can have something properly worded in real time tonight? Mike seemed to indicate that he'd want to have some time with that.
I would be probably needing to talk to Peter, Dave, I'm sorry, to David about it as I'm going through it.
Okay,
Um,
all right.
I mean, I sure as heck don't want to be the reason that things get slowed down or come to a grinding halt. This train seems to be moving at a pretty good clip. There's going to be a lot of talk. I know that you're going to have a lot of conversation going on after, in the next phase of what you're doing tonight. So I could take a shot at it. I probably would need to call David and have a quick chat with him while everyone is doing their statements and stuff. But because I see so many different places here that, to be very honest, I see so many different places here that might need to be adjusted. And David, is that your kind of feeling too? That
If there are areas that you believe need revision, and it's not something that would be doable within a matter of minutes, but rather might take some more deliberative thought, then I would caution against trying to do it tonight just for the sake of doing it. I know that there is the concern, as you say, of not stopping progress, but in my view, what we're talking about is perfecting language and not something that would take any more than a matter of days until the board could reconvene and have a final order in front of it. And I would recommend that you be comfortable with the language so that the board can be comfortable with the final product. So I do think it's important that we be as careful and accurate as we can.
okay? So in a very fast moving manner, I think that you'd need to notice your meeting. You'd need to post your agenda tomorrow for a Tuesday meeting would be the soonest you could do it. But I'm comfortable telling you that I'd have something done and reviewed by David before Tuesday, I guess. I know David's on vacation at the moment, although you dress very strange for a guy on vacation, David. You look like some kind of lawyer or something. But it's I don't want to put a strain on that either. But I think even if you got in on Monday morning and took a look at it, David, maybe we could still meet the Tuesday night deadline to have a meeting.
Yes, that would be doable on my end.
All right, so I think that's what we should do. We should shoot to have a meeting on Tuesday night. So we will continue our public hearing to that date, which would be Tuesday, the 20th. Because I think it's basically, unless there are any other comments from the board, I think it's just this one section that we're talking about now. I believe we're comfortable.
I have, well, let me interject because I think there was a question from Peter earlier on about adding some of the citations back into the order. And I'm not sure if that question was ever answered as to whether or not it would be harmful to put it back in. Where did we land with putting the legal citations back into the order?
I noticed that Mike shared with us the citations that he had referred to, and that we could attach it or refer to, that it's available.
Not
It
the
could-
medical citations, but the
Yeah, no, you're right.
Well, we pulled those out because your attorney asked us to, so. And we never questioned the attorney, ever. So he had his
Yeah.
reason. Although there
Yeah,
was one
and
that survived those cuts, which I thought was very interesting too, but
I could try to reframe my question and then and it was basically were they taken out of preference or were they, were they doing any harm by being in there?
I would simply say that the citations that are in the order now are those that I would recommend be included, and that, in my view, for an order of this nature, are appropriate for inclusion.
and we never do, by the way. This is probably the first cease and desist order or order to correct where MAHB has actually included case law. And it was, I think I had maybe mentioned, I don't know if I mentioned our last meeting or if I may have mentioned it just to Michael in a conversation, that we'd had a very similar issue in another municipality, and I wanted just to have the case law there so that the attorney for the water company would see those cases before making a comment on the record in a public meeting. So, but I there's no reason to have them in there, Peter, really.
It's fine.
Is the law is the law is the law, and that's why you have like maybe what I consider to be just about the best lawyers that there are in the state on this stuff.
I'm good with moving on.
Okay. So are there any other sections that we'd like to talk about?
J-
Yep.
Before we leave completely that paragraph that refers to random testing, and we also talked about adding the source, and then Ruby had also recommended a full panel be done as a baseline, and I just wanted to make sure that that got included. I think starting with a broad spectrum baseline is a good idea.
Okay. And I guess the perennial question is, do we need that specificity, or is that something that will be part of the plan being drawn up that we refer to?
I think it's more comfortable to put it in to actually have that specificity that you're looking for that as a baseline.
Okay. All right. Anything else?
I do have one more question. So, in the order as drafted, it says, that you would require the respondent to contract or have a third party independent lab do the testing. I just want to hear the legal opinion about how, if there's a conflict with the entity that's issuing the order taking the samples, as opposed to an independent contractor taking the samples.
Mr. Chair, if a Board of Health exercises its regulatory authority through an agent, that agent, in my view, has the ability to carry out whatever the task is. As a general proposition, if a third party is a sampler, that would provide a level of insulation against any suggestion that there was improper conduct or inappropriate treatment of samples. I think the discussion so far has been based somewhat more on the ability to do testing and get results more quickly. But if it's only a short amount of time, and this may be something for further discussion, it may be appropriate not to have the sampling done by an agent, quote unquote, at the board. But I think I'd want to hear a little more comment about the ability or availability of other sampling options.
The laboratory that's in that area geographically, that's closest, does not offer the sampling. I also have had conversations with them. They don't offer the sampling. There may be labs, but they may be way further away, which is going to affect all kinds of issues. But what we're really looking at is the same thing as under the police powers of a Board of Health. You're looking, I think this is a strong analogy to the fact that the arresting officer comes to court and testifies when there's been an arrest in a police situation. We're not asking one of the folks to that lives at 1313 Mockingbird Lane to do a sample and bring it to the lab. The Board of Health is an independent. It's as far as they don't have a dog in the hunt, really. This isn't the Board of Health versus the waterworks. This is the Board of Health trying to get the waterworks to give a good product. So, I mean, unless you tell me I'm way off base, David, I don't see a whole lot of options for one thing, and for the other, I think that the Board of Health has lots of integrity. They're not going to stop on the side of the road and add manganese to it or anything.
Right, I concur with all of those comments, and what you've said, I think, gives confirmation to the perhaps logistical concern of trying to do it through persons other than agents of the board. And in the development of the testing protocol, it may be the case that we could have certain tests that are not from samples that are collected by an agent. But I think that's something that the consultant would advise on and the board would need to consider. So I'm comfortable with that answer and proceeding as we've discussed thus far.
Okay, well, certainly, I think will help streamline things and expedite them if one of our agents collects samples, provided that they have the protocol, that they understand the protocols of how to gather the proper sample, and that we have that chain of custody. I think those will go a long way to instilling confidence in what work is being done on our behalf. So I'm comfortable with that, as per our discussion tonight. Okay, any further comments? Or things we need to consider? That was all the questions I had earlier, and
I'm thinking one of the topics that's going to come up in the public discussion is going to be just reconsidering the nuisance piece of this. And I know we talked about that last time, and we're just going to have to address again. Should we be going down the route purely based on health and disease, or is there some consideration we should be giving to nuisance in a broader sense that potentially gives us more teeth or other options than we have currently? So I'm just just in watching the discussions that are happening online around this, and knowing that there's some people who have advocated heavily for utilizing the nuisance controls that the Board of Health might have. So I think we can just let that come up in the discussion and then try and address it then.
Let me just say, I will freely admit that I have joined the Facebook group so that I could monitor what the tenor is from the eastern part of the state. I can see what's going on there very well. And I have actually had offline conversation with one of the posters about that issue. And the issue really is that I think that there was a mistaken assumption, because what I read was there was a quote from what appeared to be a regulation that was numbered 4.0 or something of that sort. And I couldn't find it anywhere. And then I realized what I was looking at was something that I had written as a form. It was a MAHB, not a regulation, but it was a form that was supplied. And so that's not a regulation, but your strongest jurisdiction that you have is the nuisance statute. And I think that your counsel will certainly agree with that and will probably speak to that. But I want to be very careful about not victimizing people who live in the homes already, who are already having enough issues and problems. We have to be very careful that we keep this aimed at drinking water, because I don't want to see somebody in a position where the Board of Health actually might say, you can't live in that house, because then what happens? So we're really doing this as an enforcement with the waterworks and not trying to drag anybody else into it. And David, I'm being very careful that I don't go too far with with my comments, and I hope that you are agreeing with what I'm saying about that.
I would simply add that the order as drafted does certainly reference and include the board's authority with respect to public nuisance, and I think that subject is covered under the terms of the order.
Great, thanks. Okay, I don't have anything else in terms of the notice order.
Nor do I. Ruby, any final comments before we move forward tonight?
Mr. Chair, excuse me, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I think that if you read the paragraph once more, it does say, thereby ordered to appear before the board at its next regular meeting, which is sometime in September, early September, in order to establish a timetable for retaining a water system operating consultant and an independent testing laboratory, and I would add a scheduled program that would be demonstrative of scientific data, something to that effect, and just leave it at that as far as timing. So it gives us from now, which is about 2 to 3 weeks, time to be able to get that in place. And I think that's good enough for the order. I'm not a lawyer, obviously, but I think that would be good enough so we can move it forward.
You were gonna say something, David? Do you care to?
This was on an not immediately related topic, but there is the question of the board's acknowledgement of various source materials and scientific data that are referenced in a general fashion in the order. I believe Mr. Hugo has provided the board with a list of sources, and the board can do this either before or after it hears comment. But I do recommend that before adopting the order, that there be an acknowledgement on the record of the various scientific sources that the board is making the order in reference to, so that it's so that there's an identification of the particular data and information that are being relied upon.
Yes, I think there's a document that's being put together that we will show or allude to. That one of my questions earlier, or at our last meeting, was when we passed our glyphosate regulations, we had a similar desire to have our scientific sources listed, and we had it listed in an addendum. I don't know if that's appropriate for this type of order, but we certainly want to have a list that we made public at the same time that we issue this order. And I'm just not sure what that should look like, or.
Oh, we have a list. The
Yes,
list was sent to us today.
Right, right. And what I'm thinking is somewhere in that, without scrolling through, in the document where we have the whereases,
Yes,
we might want to say, whereas the board has considered blah, 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 as evidenced by Exhibit A or Attachment A. David, does that make sense to do it that way?
That would be one way to do it, yes.
Okay, I'll add that in at that point.
okay, excellent. All right, any other comments from the board or from town council or Mr. Hugo? All right, if there are none, then I propose that we grant Mr. Mercer's request for the opportunity to address the board before we move into continuing our public comment period.
I agree. Do you need a motion or are we good to go?
I think we're good to go.
Yeah,
This-
that's sufficient for the chair to do that, yes.
Okay, great, thank you. We'll just get Rebecca's working on the proper Zoom steps.
Good evening. Thank you for allowing us to participate tonight. Our attorney, Robert Cox, is also on. If you could elevate him, please, and he would be making a statement first.
Okay,
Yes,
just
I'm here. So let me introduce myself first. My name is Bob Cox. I am an attorney with Bowditch and Dewey, a law firm that's located in Boston, Framingham, and in Worcester. My practice is devoted to environmental law and with a subspecialty in water-related law. I'm also on the faculty at Suffolk University Law School, where I teach environmental law. And I have been counseling HWWC for about 8 years, specifically with respect to Safe Drinking Water Act requirements as they are implemented and imposed by Mass DEP. So my comments are very brief and to the point, and they are these. The order that you're proposing first cites to and relies upon Chapter 111, Section 122, which authorizes the board to make regulation. But that's not what you're doing here. You're issuing an order, and as I heard others refer to it, an enforcement order. Second, you cite to and rely upon Chapter 111, Section 123 to issue an order. But that order in itself exceeds the Board of Health authority. Congress has spoken here. Congress decades ago preempted the field of public drinking water and the regulation of public drinking water through the Safe Drinking Water Act. EPA runs the program. EPA has delegated to Mass DEP how to run that program. It is extensive, it is comprehensive. It's founded upon EPA's expertise in the science that it brings to the table. And especially when it comes to contaminants in drinking water, which is within the sole powers of EPA and the sole powers within the Safe Drinking Water. So in short, what you're proposing here is or has been preempted by federal statute as directed by Congress and as delegated to Mass DEP. You can't do this. And with that, I understand that Mr. Mercer has and wants you to be aware of the testing schedule, the sampling schedule that is imposed by the regulations under the Safe Drinking Water Act. So you're aware of what sort of frequency, what sort of compounds are regularly sampled. So I understand Mr. Mercer also provided you with a document that shows that schedule, and I'd ask at this time you put that on the screen.
okay, thank you, sir.
Okay, Mr. Mercer, I'd have you walk through this and tell the board what this is.
Yes, thank you. First, I'd like to make a statement. You know, as everyone knows, Housatonic Water is a regulated public utility, which means that our operations, our rates, our water quality are closely overseen by two agencies, the DEP and the DPU. As a certified operator of Housatonic Water for over 40 years, I can attest to the rigorous standards and procedures that guide our work. When it comes to water quality, Mass DEP has a comprehensive oversight. This includes evaluating any modifications to our water treatment. As we look through these charts here, this is our testing schedule set forth by DEP. Different months, different items, different compounds, different contaminants. As you scroll down farther, you'll see that there's some lead and copper sampling. Every utility gets a list of things that are required to be tested for. That's every utility in the entire country. So it's pretty comprehensive. In addition, we perform continuous sampling for essential water quality indicators such as chlorine levels, pH, temperature, and turbidity. Our operations are supported by a SCADA system, which electronically monitors all the records and keeps all that data intact. The system is equipped with alarms to notify if there are any substantial changes in turbidity or chlorine or high flows. I know when there's a fire, we know there's a fire because I'll get an alarm on my phone that tells us there's a high water usage. We also employ an independent sampling process. All testing is conducted by certified lab personnel who are responsible for doing the samples. They go out according to these schedules, make their own appointments with the different households to do the testing or public locations, and they do that work completely separate from us. We don't touch the samples. By the way, we use Housatonic Basin is the lab that does the collections, and Microbac, which is next door to them, does all our water testing. I know you mentioned that earlier. The results are sent to us at the same time that they are sent to DEP, ensuring transparency and accuracy in reporting. I'd like to also clarify, there's been some misinformation out there regarding sampling sites. One concerns my father's residence on North Plain Road. He is a water customer, has been for over, I think it's close to 70 years at this point, and he does not have a well on that property. His water is tested because of the availability. It's an open situation where the lab can go in there to draw samples in that part of town. We have other locations in the center of town and on the outliers of town, like at Brookside School, that they sample at the same time. They just pop in there. They don't have to wait for anything. It's always open, or they have a key and they go in and do these samples. So I just want to put that forward. And if there are any questions that the board had, I could certainly answer those as well.
All right, thank you, Jim. Are there any questions for the board?
Jim, have you been testing the manganese more frequently than what's there?
The requirement is we test monthly, and that's what we've been doing.
Oh, because on there it says only test in May.
We're testing. We're testing monthly with the manganese year round.
Okay. And do you test all of the sites for manganese when you do the
That
testing?
they have certain sites that they test. They test the raw water, they test the finished water, and they tested at 3 locations in town.
Okay. Do you have Can you explain to us what your thoughts are for the turbidity and the brown water that has consumed a lot of the uh, well-being of the Housatonic residents? Uh, can you give us your input on that?
Sure. If you look at our system, you know, it's a reservoir, so it's open to Mother Nature. And like many utilities across the Northeast, there have been climate change has affected them all. We sent out a press release we post on our website and sent it out to the customers that we had their emails for. And on that, within that press release, there's a link to an interactive site, Commonwealth DEP manganese detection. And on that, there's a graphic that shows the state of Massachusetts with a bunch of dots on it. And those are all sites throughout Massachusetts that are tested for manganese. And there are low levels, medium levels, high levels. Camps are tested, state parks are tested, residences, schools, you know, it's a myriad of different testing sites. But the prevalence is significant. You know, one of the things that I found interesting is when you go on there, you find that there's 2 other locations in Great Barrington that have high manganese. One is Beartown State Forest, the campground in Great Barrington. And the other is AIER, which is right above the water company on the hill. And their level is substantially higher than our level. But in either event, you know, it's just one of those things. It was very complicated to get our arms around initially because it isn't something that happened every year. You might remember last year, there was no manganese detected for almost 18 months. Last summer, we didn't have any. But when we did have the issues, we went through the process. We identified the problem. We hired experts to study it. We did a 1-year pilot study, which sampled the water year round and came up with a methodology to address the manganese, which is green sand filtration. That was required by DEP. Again, I think everyone's very frustrated because these things seem to take so long, but there's a reason for that, because they want to make sure that the right action is taken. And I know that everyone's patience is very thin and it's very challenging for us as well. You know, we've lived in the community. I grew up here. I know all these people, and it's very challenging. But that's the environmental situation that we have to deal with. We have to deal with these regulations. And now, as you know, the technology was approved. We're in the design phase of the green sand filtration. And we plan on installing that so that next summer and going forward, we'll not have to have the discoloration in the water anymore.
Any other questions from the board?
It's
Jim,
not an opinion.
Go ahead, Peter.
No, it's okay. I think I was curious to hear about kind of plans and when things were going to get implemented with the green sand filtration and kind of what the expectations were in terms of solving this issue.
I could elaborate a little bit on that, Peter. First, I'd like to mention, of course, discoloration isn't toxic. It doesn't mean toxic. It's not palatable. It's an aesthetic issue as far as DEP is concerned, but it's very concerning for everyone. But as far as the timetable go, we're working on the final design of the green sand filtration. We'll be coming to the board where we have to put a new building up, and that is designed. We're working on getting the bid documents out for that. We will be coming before the Board of Health for to put in 1,000-gallon tight tank for the bathroom that's required to go with this building by statute. And the system that we're looking at, all the components are available, and they will be shipped out in the spring and put together, and we'll be ready to run it for next summer.
I'm wondering if there's any explanation you can give us why some houses have this brown water and some houses don't.
The same water goes into the system at the source. Everyone gets the same water. We don't send certain water to Main Street and other water to Oak Street. I think that if you look at our system, we have three major trunk lines, which means that the main transmission line runs down towards North Plain Road. One line runs up North Plain Road. A second line is on Van Duzenville Road, and a third is over on Park Street. And off each one of those main transmission lines are smaller lines for streets and even smaller lines for service lines. So depending where the flow, when the manganese is in the water, it starts out at the plant and the water temperature is warmer up there because of, coming out of the lake. And as it cools down, the manganese particulate matter settles down. It's very, 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 very minute. The slow sand filters that we have are very adept at taking out bacteria and addressing the bacteria, but that passes right through the media which is in our slow sand filters. But that's how minute it is. It's extraordinary. It's fascinating, really. But once it's into the pipes, into the water, it's suspended. As the water temperature cools, it drops out and settles at the bottom of the pipe. So depending what flow goes through those different pipes that we have, if there's say the mill uses a lot of water at one point, it'll pull the water and stir up that sediment in the bottom of the pipe. It'll look basically like a cloud of manganese might be going down the pipe, and depending who turns the water on, they would get a slug of that in their house. Other houses aren't affected. They might be areas where they're dead ends and there's not that much water usage, so it never materializes in their part of town. Another factor that exacerbates the situation is that most of the service lines, which are the customer's responsibility, are 80 years old and are galvanized material. Galvanized material is basically, it's steel with zinc on the outside of the pipe. And the way they deteriorate over time from the inside out. And as they deteriorate on the inside of the pipe, it becomes crusty and iron is flaked off, and particulate matter can get stuck in those crevices like the manganese. So when they turn the water on, they can get manganese, they can get iron. So that can affect it. Also, we have 9 streets within the town, which are private roads, they're private mains. We don't own or maintain those mains. And many of the complaints that we continually see are from residents on those streets, because those streets don't have hydrants at the back and cannot be flushed out. We don't own them. It's not our responsibility. And if we were able to flush those out, we would. So we have new regulations that were recently passed. DEP promulgated them and wants us to enforce them, where these mains have to be addressed. So there's many, many factors that come into this. But the bottom line is we've acknowledged the problem. We have a technology that's proven to be effective, and we're on our way to getting that done.
Can I just ask a question? Since there are 3 lawyers here, I would like to just clarify who is responsible for the pipes. The safe drinking law states that the supplier is responsible from the source to the tap. But is that really true? Or who's really responsible for let's say the private streets, or the line that goes from the main street line to the house? Who's responsible for those pipes if they need to be changed or updated?
I don't think that's a legal question. I think that Mr. Mercer can answer that question.
Again,
Go ahead, Jim. I would just say one thing. I think the legal question that Ruby's asking is alluding to the Safe Water Drinking Act, which we have heard people attest to, that a public water supplier is responsible from the source to the tap. So that, I think that's the legal question. Is that true? And I think the practical side of the question, certainly Jim can answer. Am I getting that right, Ruby?
Yes, thank you.
Jim, if you want to take the technical side first and then,
All the mains that we own, we maintain. If you look on our website, we have a section with service lines, and it shows where our responsibility begins and the homeowner's or business owner's responsibility begins. And if on our DPU return is a list of all the mains that we have put in. There are no service lines listed there. There are no private lines listed there. So the mains that we have, we maintain. We don't maintain service lines or private roads.
okay. And Mr. Cox, would you care to take a stab at that question of, is that a accurate characterization of the Safe Water Drinking Act? That,
No, it's not. It's not. The providers provide safe drinking water in accordance with the regulations that DEP has set forth. And that's what HWWC has been doing.
okay, thank you.
So, but DEP is asking them to test at all these sites all around, and that must be because there's also an expectation for a certain outcome.
Of course there is. That's the nature of the Safe Drinking Water Act.
Yeah.
EPA has regulated contaminants that can and cannot be in drinking water. There are about 90 of them, 90 that are regulated out of how many chemicals, compounds that exist in the universe. So, of course, that's why the sampling is required. And it's been that way for, several decades across the country, as Mr. Mercer said.
It kind of suggests, though, that there's a certain expectation, though, of for the water coming out in the taps to be of a certain quality.
Yes.
So I'm just kind of pushing that point a little bit, that if it does describe that it's from the supply through to the tap, but that you're saying they're not responsible for what's coming out from the tap.
Look, I'm not gonna debate with you. You can look at the Safe Drinking Water Act. You can look at EPA's website to learn what is required of public water supplies. Okay, it's public information. It's been up there for decades. The concept that is the Safe Drinking Water Act that controls the entire domain of drinking water is not a new one. It is a preemption that has been there for decades.
Yeah. So on a slightly different note, I'm just wondering about, I feel like we're here because, maybe there hasn't been enough communication. Maybe there would be more sympathy from the public if the waterworks was saying, hey, we've tested it. Yes, these things are high. Yes, you can expect this brown water. Yes, we expect that to resolve in the fall and or with the sand filtration, but instead they're sitting there not feeling safe, getting brown water, everything from ruining their clothes to thinking that they're supposed to drink or consume this stuff. They're paying for something that they can't, feel safe around in their home. So I'm just wondering what you can say to that.
I would suggest they look at the test results. They speak for themselves. I know there's a lot of second guessing and people are questioning whether this is, trying to interpret these tests and twisting them a different way, but actually look what the results are. And more importantly, look to see what DEP and EPA, the reaction is. They know that we're working towards resolving this. We're in compliance. We're moving. That's really the goal, is to move this forward so we get this resolved. And we filed a rate case to do the improvements. And as you know, the town is looking to appeal that. I'm not sure what effect that's going to have on us, but the rates are in effect. They're not going to change. The likelihood of the town prevailing in that area is very remote, which they know. So again, we're focused on a task at hand in resolving it, and we have been. It's just frustrating for us as well because people expect things quickly now, and it just, these things take time. because of the regulatory environment that we live in.
Two questions, Jim. The first being, is it fair to say that you are making the case that the water being supplied by Housatonic Waterworks is unrelated to the brown water that certain residents have coming out, and that water would basically be because of service lines or some other factor? And the second part, which is more of a global look, when and if, let's say when the green sand filtration plant is built and operational, if people are still experiencing brown and cloudy water, what would you say to that? Would that just be a further example that
I think,
go ahead.
no, I think that in each individual case is different. You know, with the houses that are on private lines that we know are galvanized and need replacement, that's pretty self-evident that there's something wrong with the main and or their service line. If there's issues within town, there again, the testing really reveals, it doesn't hide anything, it reveals the truth. All the different testing that we do.
Are you
Okay.
saying that all the test results are available? Because when I look on your website, I see some results, but not all the testing you're talking about. And there's
We don't post everything. If there's any violation, of course, that comes out. We haven't been in violation of anything the last couple of years. The haliacidic acid issue, which I know is very disconcerting for all, that is a result of having too much water. We have over 1 million gallons of water at the ready for the town. And because the water is in the tank there with the chlorine, it created haliacidic acids. Our engineers looked at that situation, determined that we've got a two-step chlorination would be better than the one-step chlorination that we had. And once they did the engineering on that, DEP had to approve that. DEP approved that. We went to a two-stage chlorination. So we had a smaller amount of chlorine at the initial phase, then all the water is in the storage tank. And then before it goes to town, it's stepped up again. And we did that last fall, and we've had 2 quarters that were back in compliance with HAE 5s. So we anticipate that is resolved. That issue is resolved. That information is out there. It's on our website. As an aside, you know, Rebecca, as the health agent, she gets all the DEP reports. She CC'd on most of those reports.
Jim, could you add a little bit more clarification to the too much water in the storage tank? I know you've explained to me the situation there, but I don't know if it's common knowledge with most.
Again, there's so many different complexities. Back 30 years ago, when we were looking to do some improvements, we wanted to put meters in. And at that point, we're pumping about 300,000 gallons a day. So DEP said you have to have 3 times your usage in storage for fire flow. So at that point, we designed a 1 million gallon storage tank. We did several line upgrades throughout town to meet those standards. And everything was fine until we put the meters in. Once we metered everyone, our flow dropped dramatically. People realized that if they had a leak, they fixed the leak. Also, large businesses like Rising Paper used an awful lot of water years ago. You know, they don't use nearly as much at this point. So we have this excess water. So really, we're a resource of the region. You know, Great Barrington is looking for a secondary source. We have it. We have more water than we know what to do with. The 2 most expensive things for a water utility is to cite a source and storage. We have a secure source. We have more than adequate storage. And once we get the green sand filtration in, you know, as we've mentioned at our informational meetings, which we've held twice a year, we're looking to do an interconnection with the Great Barrington Fire District on Christian Hill Road. So then we'll be able to take advantage of, resiliency. If they need water, they can borrow it from us. If something happens on our end, we could, buy water from them. It's really at some point, long term, both the Great Barrington Fire District and Housatonic should be combined for many reasons. Operationally, we're in the same town. There's also a lot of funds for improvements. But that's another story. I don't mean to go off topic.
That's okay. Thank you for that, more detail. Would, Mr. Huger or, Dave Dineski care to respond to the initial statements, from Mr. Cox?
Mr. Chair, I will simply say that I am aware that under the installation of systems, including this system, there are certain water lines that are not company lines that were installed over the course of years under circumstances we may not precisely be able to determine at this point, but that are not under the company's control, so that there are places in the overall system, if you will. And by that, I'm talking about anywhere that water ultimately flows to an end user, areas that are not part of the company infrastructure and therefore are not areas that the company does either maintenance or other repairs on. And so from that perspective, it is correct to say that there are places where the company is not, quote unquote, responsible for particular service lines. I think beyond that would get us probably outside the focus of our discussion tonight.
Okay, thank you.
It does seem like whether it's easy or challenging, that those lines need to be, there needs to be a system to be able to flush them. And I feel like maybe it is getting a little bit off topic, but I'm thinking that flushing those lines would be a big part of this. That even getting a better, improving the water at the source with the green sand filtration doesn't seem like it's going to solve the whole issue.
If I might just add, we do have a flushing program where we flush our mains twice a year. And last year it went very quickly because there wasn't much sediment, because there wasn't the manganese. We anticipate when we flush this fall that it's going to be very rigorous, and there'll be a lot of manganese that gets flushed out. But you're right, Peter. These private lines that don't have hydrants at the end are difficult to flush. They're difficult or impossible. Some have small blow-offs, others have nothing. There's nothing on Right Lane, for example. So that water's just sitting there.
Yeah, I'm still having a really hard time, and I don't feel like the question was answered around people paying for a product coming into their house that's crummy and potentially dangerous. And it just seems like I don't know how you respond to that. And it just seems wrong, and I'm trying to figure out what should be done about that. That people are held hostage by this situation, and I completely understand why they're so as frustrated as they are.
I'd just like to say the water is discolored. It's not toxic. And again, the way that we charge for water is regulated by the Department of Public Utilities. We've had people that are requesting rebates. We can't do that. Everyone's treated the same. It's all done regulated by the Department of Public Utilities.
Do you have test results that you haven't shared that can confirm that current water, these last couple months are meeting standards?
I can certainly, again, Rebecca might have some. I can get the testing results to you. I think it's key, again, Peter, I think that we're looking at from a regulatory standpoint. DEP reviews all that material. It's all sent in. There's a violation that we notice, it's incumbent upon us to notify them. They review everything as well. And if there is something wrong with the water, you can rest assured that they would be on top of it. That's one of the benefits of having the regulatory environment that we have, that there's lots of checks and balances. And by people that, again, that's their area of expertise. It's very challenging when lay people try to get into this. It just, some of it doesn't make sense from that standpoint, but that's the environment that we have to work within.
Any further questions? For Mr. Mercer or Mr. Cox from the board? All right, Jim, thank you for your statement tonight, and you, Mr. Cox. Is there anything you'd like to say before we move on to our public comment period?
No, thank you for the opportunity to participate tonight.
Thank you very much.
Okay. We'll now move on to our public comment, continuation of our public comment period. I'll again ask that we keep comments to no more than 3 minutes. Please state your name and address before you begin. And as a point of order, just a reminder that all questions are to be directed towards the chair, and that, as always, we endeavor to answer questions, but this is more of a time for us to gather more information or hear questions from the public rather than try to provide answers on the spot. But if we can, we always aim to do so. With that being said, I see some hands already going up, and so we will take them in the order that we see them. And Trevor Forbes will be up first.
Hi, Denise Forbes,
Denise Forbes. Yes, please go ahead.
25 North Plain Road, Housatonic, Massachusetts. I just want to say that I'm very disappointed because I basically know that the HAA 5 levels are always not reported, and basically that should be done every month in various sites, and that's really an indication of how much chlorine is added to the water. And basically that's something that concerns the public health because of issues with cancer, and there's a lot of people with cancer in this area. I'm one of them, and I basically am very upset about the fact that these service lines, that's an issue where they don't have anything to do with those lines, but yet the people have to pay for the water that run through those lines, and it's their responsibility. But meanwhile, the water flows through. Now, the whole thing is, if those lines were corroded, they would see problems with the water all the time, but they don't. They only see the high levels of manganese when there's a problem with the Long Pond water. So I think the service lines are probably not the issue, but it's probably the water at the source. And I think there should be a better investigation into this whole situation. And I'm glad you guys are on top of this. I'm just not happy with the answers that we got from HWW and their lawyers. But I think we should really look further into the fact that you guys, as the health department, do have jurisdiction over this. So that's all I wanted to say. I appreciate the time. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. I believe Andrew Behrens will be up next.
Hi, thanks. Andrew Behrens, 1079 Main Street in Housatonic. Again, I want to thank you for everything you guys are doing to supply the residents with adequate drinking water and to test the water to determine what contaminants are present. Just wanted to ask you if the Board of Health agencies from Stockbridge and West Stockbridge are being involved with these efforts, and whether the residents in those towns will also be able to access the remedies that you're proposing. And then just wanted to make a comment about Mr. Mercer's allegation that the brown water is related to the old cast iron pipes that are the residents' the ratepayers' responsibilities. When I look at the AECOM engineering report, it says that 70% of Housatonic waterworks owned mains are cast iron, 13% are ductile iron, and another 13% have asbestos cement around them. And many of these mains are the original ones, and they're over 100 years ago. So if the cast iron mains that are rusting are the problems that are causing the brown water, I just don't understand why Housatonic Waterworks is proposing to treat the water at the source instead of replacing these cast iron lines. And then obviously there's a lot of concerns, I think, about the asbestos exposure as these mains start to deteriorate. Thanks again for everything you guys are doing.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Maureen Q is up next. And in an attempt to answer your question about other municipalities, as far as this order would be concerned, it would only be for the municipality of Great Barrington. Those customers of Housatonic Waterworks and other towns, their boards would have to take similar action for them. Maureen Q.
Yes, Maureen Quigley, 7 Depot Street. I just want to say how disappointing it was that Mr. Mercer and Mr. Cox were unable to answer a very specific and direct question. And the fact that Mr. Cox became very curt, dismissive, condescending, and actually arrogant when asked the question if it's the legal responsibility from source to tap. Neither one of them directly answered the question, and Mr. Cox just loud out avoided it and then put it right back on you. So I'm sorry that you guys are doing this, trying to have a professional, reasonable conversation without getting a direct yes or no to a black and white question. The other thing is, if Mr. Mercer is saying that he's testing monthly for manganese, we would appreciate it if he would post it on his site. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Deborah Herman is up next.
Deborah Herman, 373 North Plain. I just want to raise the question about these so-called semi-private roads like Bright Lane. Housatonic Waterworks has gotten away with claiming they have no responsibility for those mains. They don't own them. I would like to know, where's the documentation that shows that that's the case? Is it going to be incumbent upon the people who live on those roads to try to figure out, do they own them or not? I mean, it's already been said, it's not clear. If it's not clear, why is the onus put on the unfortunate people who live on those roads? I think that question needs to be looked at. It may not be the one that's, at issue today, but I think it is an important one. And I hope that somebody will address it in a serious way. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Eileen Mooney, you're up next.
The DPU addressed the private mains. I quoted from it in the last newsletter. It's on page 4. I forget what page it's on in the DPU decision, but it basically says that prior to its next base distribution rate case, the company shall conduct an analysis of potential solutions to improve the water quality in the privately owned mains connected to its distribution system. So that it is, the DPU seems to be putting the responsibility on Housatonic Waterworks. That's all.
Right, thank you, Eileen. Trevor Forbes is up next.
Thank you, Trevor Forbes, 325 North Payne Road. Thank you very much, Michael, for letting me speak. I find it very convenient that Jim Mercer hides behind global warming and climate change as a reason for what appears to be a sudden deterioration in their water system. We've done a lot of research on the complaints associated with the Housatonic Waterworks, and I can certainly see that this extends back over 40 years. So to basically try and say this is all to do with climate change, I think is being very insincere. In addition to which, it was certainly the case when we first drew to Jim Mercer's attention that there was a problem with brown water at our house something like 14 years ago when we started up our bed and breakfast. We were told quite clearly from Jim Mercer, this is very unusual. Nobody's actually had this problem before. Well, we found subsequently that this problem was actually all too frequent and actually quite long-standing. In addition to which, another consumer of Housatonic Waterworks water also had the same problem. This was a new business that came into this area and was a customer of Housatonic Waterworks. And this would have been around about 5 years ago. And guess what? When they raised the question with Jim Mercer, they got the same reply that we got 14 years ago. Oh, this is very unusual. We've never seen this before. So I have to say that a lot of the comments that come from Jim Mercer and his lawyer really sound quite insincere and rather improbable. So I'm afraid I have huge problems with the comments that they have made this afternoon. And I really do appreciate the health board getting involved with this. I think this is a major issue. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Not seeing any other hands up. Is there anyone else who'd like to join public comment period? Next will be Lucinda's iPhone.
Hi, Lucinda Hastings, 12 Wright Lane, Housatonic. Piggybacking a little bit on Deborah Herman, I've only lived here for, well, less than 10 years. And in that time, I had to replace my own pipes, not in my yard, the road pipes. They,
Unfortunately, we just lost Lucinda Hastings. So while she reconnects, we'll move to Donna Jacobs.
Hi, Donna Jacobs, 260 Park Street, with very sketchy reception tonight. You may lose me as well. I also want to reiterate how glad I am to have the Board of Health involved in this. And I do believe that all of the activity from the residents to the town representatives and government is going to make something happen. It's a critical mass and something's going to have to give. Unfortunately, Jim Mercer did not make a public relations statement tonight. He's pointing the finger of blame at residents who have private lines to their houses. He's blaming global warming. And if he wants to work cooperatively with residents, that's not the way to go about doing it. And certainly denying what everybody has read in the documents of the DPU and working with the association, the State Association of Health Boards, I agree that Mercer and his attorney are being insincere and trying to present an alternate perspective just to throw us off our track here. Thanks very much.
All right, thank you for your comments. We have Lucinda Hastings back with us, so we will go to her.
Hi, sorry, something happened over here. So when I had to replace the pipes, maybe a year or two after I lived here, my neighbors kind of clued me in. They said there's like water collecting because it was down by the road. The property slants down a little bit. I didn't really know that, what the little pond was. And that neighbor told me that most of them on this street most of the residents, and there's like, I don't know, 6, 7 houses, have replaced their pipes. Now, this development, this semi-private road was built, or my house was built in 1980. They're not old houses. So we don't have the old cast iron pipes, to blame. Also, I'm a little confused by something Jim said. I thought he said, because they're a dead end, the people don't get the sediment going through as much, so we don't have as much brown water. But then later on, he said, because there's no hydrants, they don't get flushed. Maybe I got that wrong, but it seemed to be contradictory statements. I'm really wondering how the whole semi-private thing got established. It's not a public utility, so why would they not serve semi-private roads? And the town plows the roads, by the way. We still need water and fire hydrants. There's just a lot of questions I have about that issue. And I had one other that I forgot, but as Peter said, it is wrong. It is wrong that besides having to go get drinking water, you can't bathe. You can't bathe or shower. Is that not a public health thing? Without being covered in brown scum? You can't do your laundry without, seems to me that falls in the realm of public health. Thank you, Board of Health.
All right, thank you for your comments. I see Maureen quickly up one more time. We'll hear from you since there's no other hands up. Maureen, you're up next.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. And also Jim had contradicted himself. He said that the new filtration system will resolve this problem. And then he went on to say all the other reasons, which we all heard. So that was kind of interesting because it's supposed to solve it, but yet it's not. And the other thing, they seem to be really big on the DEP regulations. We also have a Surgeon General who the public health realm goes by healthy people, and now it would be 2030. And the whole purpose of Healthy People is to identify public health priorities to help individuals, organizations, and communities across the United States improve health and well-being. Healthy People 2030, the initiative's 5th iteration, builds on knowledge gained over the first 4 decades. And one of the main goals is to increase the proportion of people whose water supply meets drinking water regulations and increase the proportion of people whose water supply meets Safe Drinking Water Act regulations. So the Mercers have been given 100+ years when they acquired this to get this right. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your comments. I'm not seeing any other hands up, but is there anyone else who'd like to speak during this public health, during this public comment period? Not seeing any other hands. I believe we talked about a date for continuing this hearing of the 20th of August, Tuesday, the 20th. So I'll look for a motion to continue this public hearing to that date.
I make a motion to continue the public hearing to Tuesday, the 20th of August.
And I believe it will be at 6:30. Just need a second.
You said the 20th? Tuesday?
Yes. Tuesday the 20th.
Okay, It would be difficult for me to join that meeting.
Okay. Is there a day that close by that would be better?
I'm so sorry. I could do the Monday or the Wednesday. I could do Thursday, any other day that week except Tuesday.
I think it has to be a Tuesday or after because of the timing of notice.
Yes.
So it's Wednesday or Thursday. It seems like Thursday is our golden day.
Okay, Wednesday would be a little challenging for me. I'd have to be done by 8 o'clock at the earliest. So if we want to have an open-ended time, Thursday would probably be the best bet.
I make a motion that we continue the public hearing on Thursday, the 22nd, 6:30.
Okay, for a roll call will be Peter,
Aye.
Ruby,
Aye.
and I vote aye as well. Next up for tonight's meeting is citizen speak time. If there's anyone else who would like to speak. And also any media questions. Please raise your hand. All right, we'll keep the same time limit for this of 3 minutes. I see 2 hands. We'll start with Deborah Herman.
Deborah Herman, 373 North Plain. I just want to also say that, Jim Mercer has emphasized the fact that he claims that the water, doesn't have health problems, that it's just, brown and ugly, maybe doesn't taste too good and ruins your laundry. I think that we don't really know the true, since it seems like some people's water is very dark brown, some people's is tea colored. It seems just by the appearance that the levels of manganese in the various samples likely differs, and some of them quite possibly could be over the threshold that makes it a health hazard. But even if it's not a health hazard, who in their right mind, who's not absolutely, impoverished and without any choices, would drink that water or would bathe their children in it or wash their laundry? So it's not fit for ordinary use. And despite what he says, it's not a health problem. I'm not sure that that's the case, but even if it is the case, it's still not usable. Thank you very much for your efforts. I appreciate it. And I hope it all goes well. Thank you.
All right, thank you for your comments. Maureen Quigley is up next.
So just a couple of questions. I think it was mentioned earlier that we didn't want to use the same lab that HWW is using. So they mentioned Housatonic Basin and Macrobac. So do we know if that was Macrobac Labs in Lee? Or if it's a different Macrobac? Because if we want to use a different lab, then that was part of the discussion. And the other thing is if Michael, we could have the attorney or Mike Hugo answer the legal question about source to tap, if they can give insight on that legally. And also, I think that there are evidence-based data that will say that the levels of manganese are harmful to children despite what DEP has regulated, which we can find articles to prove that.
Okay. Thank you for your comments. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak tonight before we look to adjourn?
Do we need a couple minutes discussion just about next steps and what's going to happen between now and Thursday, so that we make sure we're ready to go then?
Of course, if you'd like.
I guess I'm wondering,
I guess, yeah,
Go
I guess the first thing is that I'm going to change the language in that, and I was going to do it tonight, but I don't think I need to be doing it tonight. Quite honestly, I just came back from Nashville a few hours ago, and my head is not 100% clear to start writing something now, and I absolutely would never do anything without David, your counsel, looking at it. So I'm going to get something to David by Monday. Is that enough time, David, for you to do what you need to do before Thursday?
Yes, that would be fine.
Okay, and any one of the three of you and Rebecca, any of you may hear from me out of the blue sometime tomorrow with some specific questions. How's this sound to you and all of that? And Ruby, I know that you had something very specific in mind, so I'll get in touch with you and just make sure that I'm covering what you want. Let's get this right this time so that we can get some water into these people's houses that they can drink. It's very troublesome. So,
Okay.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you for attending despite of the fact that you had a long travel history recently.
okay, it's okay.
I do think that that people, minimally, the kind of least thing we could do is help get drinkable water to people. But I'm just wondering if there's anything we learned in the discussion with Jim and his attorney that would change anything or guide us in a slightly different direction than we were going at this time.
Factually, I there was nothing that jumped out at me that was unusual. There may be some legal issues that David is mulling over, and that I definitely will be talking to David about some of the doctrine things. I don't practice anymore, so I'm not coming at it from that end. But MAHB has been participating in some issues, in some other issues that involve the preemption issues, and we haven't had to write it. There's some very well-known attorneys from out of state and from in-state that have been briefing that same issue. So I'm going to bring all of that to David and have a discussion with him on that. But that's your attorney's thing, not mine. So.
Okay. Before we adjourn, we have one more comment. I saw Trevor Forbes' hand going up and down, so we'll hear from him before we look to adjourn. That'll be a last comment for this evening.
Hi, it's Denise Forbes. Sorry about that. I was doing the wrong thing with the hand. Sorry. But I just wanted to make one more comment, mirroring on what Maureen was talking about. All her comments were spot on, and I agree with her implicitly. My thing is, I had turned my faucet on to wash vegetables. My water was totally brown. And I, at that point, I texted Jim because I have his number, and I said, I would like you to drink this water. I would like to see him drink the water in front of everyone, brown as it may be, to prove to everyone how safe it is. It may not be aesthetically beautiful, but it's safe for him to drink. I'd like everyone would like to see him drink that water, because then we could all say, oh, okay, it is so okay to drink. But I doubt if that would ever happen, because that water is so disgusting. It's horrible. But anyway, that was just a side comment, maybe to give you all a chuckle, because we need it at this point. It's just been crazy. Anyway, but thank you again for helping, pitching in, and doing all you do. The health board, thank you. Cheers and kudos to you guys. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, thank you for your comments. So I want to thank Mike Hugo again for coming to our meeting and for David Dineski for taking time out of his vacation to attend our meeting. Much
Welcome.
appreciated to you both. And I'll look for a motion to adjourn tonight's meeting.
I make a motion to adjourn meeting.
I second.
Our final roll call will be Peter,
Aye.
Ruby,
Aye.
and I vote aye as well. All right, thank you everyone, and we'll see you next Thursday.
Thank you all.
Thank
Right,
you.
good night.